generation will not have the benefit of hearing firsthand the horror of the Holocaust, whose father was a member of the Holocaust. The burden is on us to pass on to the stories becomes heavier and heavier each year. Oftentimes I hear all the time now, why don't we just forget about the past?
Right.
Why don't we just forget about slavery?
All right.
Can you imagine what the reaction would be if you would go to a synagogue or in public say, why don't you just forget about the Holocaust?
Right.
What do you think would happen to you? You'd be run off the face of the earth.
Right.
We should be always saying, never forget. Now, that's just my opinion. I don't know what you think. But it's just amazing. You know, when I emphasize the danger of being exterminated, in Germany at the end of World War II, and we know what happened at the Holocaust, General Eisenhower, along with some other generals, they got some of the Germans who did not physically participate in the extermination in the Holocaust. And it took hundreds of them down to Auschwitz and Dachau and said, how could you sit here and allow that to happen? And many of you remember the quotes. And these were brilliant people with brilliant minds, scientists, journalists, business people. It said they came after the Jews and we were not concerned. Then they came after the trade unionists and we were not concerned. Then they came after Catholics and we were not concerned. And then they came after us. And there was nobody left to be concerned. I raised the question, have they come after some of us in this country? I say yes. Have we separated ourselves one from the other? I say yes. Do we say they just don't want anything? They just want to live in the ghetto. They live in that part of town. Why would they live there? I state maybe they've already come after some of us. I hope that no one ever has to say, and then they came after us. After the Civil War, the vast majority of African Americans who were freed from slavery had no education, money, and did not own any property. My grandfather, Allen Berry Owens, I'm 2 generations removed from slavery. And we used to ask my father, what did he talk about? What did he say? He was 7 years old when slavery was in. He said, my father wouldn't talk about it. It was too painful. His mother, though, talked about what happened to her parents. My grandfather was born in 1857 in South Carolina. His father was Jim Owens, born in 1828 in South Carolina. And in 1860, he voted in an election to decide who was going to represent him in the legislature. And he marked his name with an X. He couldn't write. Then they migrated to Arkansas in the 1880s. And I've got a sister that's in Ancestry. Just amazing what they were able to do. Purchase land and buy animals and own a farm. He owned 250 acres. How he purchased it, we don't know. Again, this year's theme of the association is Black Migration. Migration, migrate, to mean to move one region to the other. The question of the state of Kansas was a major catalyst to the start of the Civil War. The question as to whether or not Kansas was to enter the Union as a free or slave state was a great factor, and probably the greatest factor in the start of the Civil War. Many incidents right in this area, right in this immediate area where we live, had a great impact on the slavery question. Many pro-slavers from Missouri came across to try to influence the vote. As a matter of fact, did influence the first one. John Brown, one of my heroes, operated out of Kansas and engaged in battles with pro-slavers. The term border wars. Now, the average person probably under 60 think we're talking about KU and Missouri. This term border wars and bleeding Kansas came out of these incidents.
Right.
After the Civil War, the vast majority of African Americans were freed from slavery. They had no education again and no money and didn't own any property. After the Civil War, Reconstruction began in the former slave-holding states. Union troops remained in those states to prevent and to protect former slaves. Some of the most violent acts of terrorism known to humankind occurred in those areas. One organization that started during that period was the Ku Klux Klan. They've been terrorists since the 1870s. I have no way of understanding why they still can operate in this country.
All right.
They're on the hate list. And I always contrast them to the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers is not what is being what is being portrayed, what they've convinced us. But the FBI had a term called CONTELPRO, which they set up to destroy them and eliminate them. And I always ask people when I'm talking, how many people did the Black Panthers kill? Always the answer is we don't know. How many do you think they killed? I don't know. The answer is 0. Ku Klux Klan has killed thousands.
Wow.
And we sit here like a bump on the log and allow them to operate. Just in a few years, the former slaveholders had taken over the states again. President Rutherford Hayes removed the Union troops from the South. The former slaves were not allowed to vote or to hold office. This was done through increased acts of violence and the changing of laws in state government. For example, in 1868, in the state of Georgia, they passed a law that coloreds could not hold a seat in the state legislature. An elected colored legislature, I'm quoting out of books now, because oftentimes when you talk, people say, oh, there he go again. So oftentimes you have to show documentation. But this colored legislature, Henry McNeil Turner, who later became an AME bishop, and is my favorite bishop, delivered a speech before the legislative body that is the most eloquent and powerful speech that I've ever read in my life, and I've read a few speeches and a few books in my life. The courage that it must have taken to deliver this speech at this time is utterly amazing. Pastor Mike, I also have a copy of this speech I'm going to leave for you also. It was stated that after Henry McNeil Turner made this speech and did many other things in Georgia during that time. He was a man, lived in South Carolina, during slavery. He was never a slave because when he was brought over here, his father had been a king in Africa. At that time, they followed the English common law. So if you had noble, what they said, noble ancestry, you could not be a slave. So he was never a slave. But he never attended a day of school in his life. Taught himself how to read and write. He was befriended by some Caucasian who was an attorney. And they taught him how to read, or assisted him in learning how to read. And he read all the law books. He became a better lawyer than they were. But he did this on his own. The migration of blacks to Kansas was one of the largest, if not the single largest migration in the history of this country. Now I said the single, where many people moved at one time. This migration was led by Benjamin Pap Singleton. I think I heard somebody say they were from Nicodemus.
Right.
I have some books here on the table about Nicodemus. This is one of the posters that he had. And it says, to all colored people that want to go to Kansas on September 5th, 1877, can do so for $5. $5 then would probably be like $100,000 now. And he lists the things, the preamble to what they believe. This is just one of the many things that you can pick up in Nicodemus, Kansas. Pap Singleton had been a slave in Tennessee, but escaped and made his way to Canada. After the war, returned to Tennessee. Somebody's here from Tennessee. Just held up the hand. But escaped, making his way to Canada. After the war, he returned to Tennessee and began to fulfill his mission, as he saw it, to see black people safe and secure, whether within or without Tennessee. He viewed his God-given mission as the removal of blacks from the former slave states. As the violence against blacks escalated, Singleton came to Kansas, and he didn't catch no airplane. And neither did he drive his SUV. Or neither did he get Amtrak. You know how he got here, don't you? Horseback. But he traveled to Kansas and discovered that the former Cherokee reservation would serve the Singleton colony in Cherokee County, Kansas. The Cherokees who inhabited that area, they had been removed under President Jackson's Indian Removal Act. If you haven't read that, Google it and read the Indian Removal Act. But they had been moved to Oklahoma. And he saw this as an ideal spot for blacks. He began sending families to the Singleton colony in Cherokee County, Kansas. Noble Prentice, the famous Kansas journalist, states that he saw and witnessed the first group of Negro colonists ever to arrive in the state. This was in Kansas City, Missouri, sometimes in 1873. This group consisted mainly of farmhands from Tennessee that was bound for Cherokee County. The leader of this group was Pap Singleton. In 1873, Singleton wrote the governor of Kansas, stating that the black people wanted to purchase land over a long period of time because they lacked the money to purchase farms outright. He stated that thousands were ready to leave Tennessee and come to Kansas. Can equate that to some of the things that are going on in this country today. Singleton set up a company, Edgefield Real Estate Association. They sponsored mass meetings to drum up support for its migration. A large meeting was held July 31st and August 1st in Nashville, Tennessee, that was open to anybody in the state, not just the blacks. The meeting was highly successful. In 1878, the association regularly conducted workshop classes, telling people what to do when they came to Kansas. Blacks came to Kansas and they incorporated the Singleton Colony in Dunlap, Morris County, Kansas. In 1879, he stayed there until the early part of the 1880s, and this marked the end of his conducting settlers from Tennessee to Kansas. Pap Singleton died February 17th, 1900, and is buried in an unmarked grave in Union Cemetery in Kansas City, Missouri. There is a group of people now just trying to find the exact location and at least purchase a headstone for his grave. Singleton's immigration probably prompted other areas of the South to leave and come to Kansas. Pap Singleton migration colony probably influenced many other migration colonies, especially from Kentucky, which was under the leadership of W.R. Hill. If my lady wife, if she was here, she'd be waving, she'd be doing this, giving a signature.